we now at Lightship, and I, as I was first starting to work on it, are really pretty devoted to building the most efficient vehicles possible so that we get good compounding effects towards greater efficiency as opposed to the alternate. Bob, maybe you should give 2 seconds on your background and tell us why you're making me relive my high school physics class.
No.
Give us a lecture on aerodynamics.
You're the one who started this and
That's right.
and did the computations on the computer, so you can describe the variables there. But
I am actually interested, maybe just for the audience, to describe a little bit of your background. That
been flying for a lot of years, but I learned a lot about aerodynamics, and the Air Force test pilots are thoroughly indoctrinated in the whole issue of drag, every aspect of drag. And so that was my introduction to it. I was a physician then, but I was enamored by the math that went into it and the physics.
Yeah, you and I, intentionally, we came at it from maybe slightly different angles. You with a pilot's background, and I've been a car guy through and through. So a lot of my the perspective that I came from, I think, you studied as an engineer?
Yeah, I was an electrical engineer in undergrad.
Yeah. I studied as a mechanical engineer, loved cars growing up, and of course aerodynamics is critical in passenger vehicles as well. It's especially important in electric vehicles. Efficiency is so often either a virtuous or a vicious cycle. Design decisions that you make towards better efficiency tend to beget even better efficiency, and inefficient design decisions worsen your efficiency. The negativity compounds on itself. In electric vehicles, aerodynamic efficiency is especially important because where on a gasoline car, there's no such thing as regenerative braking. A pure internal combustion engine vehicle, regenerative braking is not a thing. You can never recapture your kinetic or potential energy as you descend a hill or slow back down. But in an electric vehicle, you can. And so what you really need to focus on is the energy that you will expel to the environment in getting up to or maintaining a speed, and that you can never recover. Energy that you lose to the wind is literally that. It is lost to the wind, and you can never recoup it back into the battery. And so it is, it's just such a critical factor in the design of these vehicles. And so when I was first thinking about Lightship, having been living this loop of trying to get virtuous efficiencies, reduce battery cost and weight, get longer range, I had all of that in mind. And I had been especially privy to towing range with electric vehicles because I had been working on the origins of what became the Cybertruck battery, where it was clear that when you strapped a big heavy load like a trailer onto the back of an electric pickup truck, your range would suffer significantly. And it would suffer somewhat because of the weight, but even more because of the change in the aerodynamic profile of the whole vehicle system, the truck plus the trailer. So I had all that in mind, and then as you've graciously brought out, went tried to go back to the fundamentals of, okay, what if aerodynamic efficiency is one of, if not the single kind of greatest design factor that one has towards a highly efficient long-range vehicle, then what are the fundamentals driving that idea of aerodynamic efficiency? And this equation is probably the cornerstone for a lot of automotive aerodynamicists. I should say that after a few months of me working in isolation on this equation and building a very aerodynamic vehicle, I called in a professional, a real automotive aerodynamicist, a guy named Angus, who had worked on worked on the Tesla Roadster aerodynamics in its early days. He's worked in many electric vehicle programs as sort of a lead aerodynamicist in these programs. He took this idea a lot further than I could.
You actually put it in the computer and
Yeah.
simulated it.
That's
all.
right. Yeah, we began doing computational fluid dynamics modeling to simulate various shapes of vehicle and see what the resultant aerodynamic performance was.
Right.
Before we got to that point, starting with the fundamentals, the idea behind this equation is that the drag force, the aerodynamic drag force, meaning the force that the wind exerts on the vehicle as it's moving at a given speed, is equal to half of the density of air here, or the density of the fluid that you're moving through.
And for those who aren't familiar with it, we are in aviation. That's a combination of atmospheric pressure and temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit of humidity is even in that, as I recall, if you want to finely tune to get to the exact pressures. So the pressure where we are now, which is sea level, is going to be entirely different than Denver, and the difference is around 10%, or 15% for
Is it that much?
5,000, something like that. It's pretty significant when you start comparing the output.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. You as a pilot would know this better than I do.
We call it density altitude,
Yeah.
and it's super critical. The real altitude that the vehicle is seeing at 100, at same altitude at 110 degrees and 60 degrees is significantly different. Like, Denver with a 100-degree temperature, you're really pushing against air with a density of about 9 or 10,000 up to 11,000 feet. So that's why you see, as people report efficiencies, sea level versus, mountains like in Colorado, if everybody, particularly pulling with an electric vehicle or a turbocharged vehicle, is seeing a whole lot more efficiency in Colorado than they are at San Francisco.
Okay.
And that's the effective density altitude.
Okay, that's interesting. So the drag
And
force.
That's all in that P factor.
Yeah, the
P
row. Yep. So to break it down, the force that the air, the backwards force that the air exerts on the vehicle as you're moving down the road at a given speed is equal to half of the density of air times the square of the velocity of that vehicle. This is a key term.
That's the big one.
Yeah, exactly. Because what it means is that, let's say, for every 2 miles per hour faster I go, it's the square of those 2 miles per hour, 4, that will be the impact on the total drag force. So this term right here, the square of the velocity, is what makes the drag force equation blow up with velocity. So going just a little bit faster creates a lot more drag force on the vehicle. This is why you see your fuel economy or your energy consumption change so much for a relatively small change in speed.
Right.
Times, two more terms, the coefficient of drag times the frontal area.
Right.
The coefficient of drag is a unitless property based on primarily the geometry of the vehicle that you're pulling down the road, as well as, I think, a few other factors like the flow state of the air, how turbulent versus laminar the airflow is.
In the case of a trailer, since it's in the wake of a tow vehicle, it is a somewhat different term for coefficient of drag. The coefficient of drag of this thing, if you powered it without a tow vehicle, just turn on truck drive, going to be entirely different than, that term would be entirely different than in trail of the tow vehicle, right?
Yeah, that's right, because the overall turbulence or activity of the air is different if it's just a truck that you're talking about versus a truck plus a trailer.
Right.
And if you think about the shape of the whole system, that shape is very different if it's just a truck body versus a truck plus a trailer body with an air gap in between.
Right.
And for the purposes of this exercise, this design exercise was to make the most efficient possible truck plus trailer pair, or tow vehicle plus trailer pair. You had to think about the combined coefficient of drag of the two of them. It's not just the trailer.
That's a good term, combined, because it's not like an airplane. There's just one number for it.
Yeah, there are now two bodies, two bodies at play.
There's two bodies interacting.
Right.
And and it's in some of the Lightship literature, but that combined CD turns out coincidentally to be very close to a Tesla Model 3 by itself in the wind.
Yep. Right. In some ways, the trailer itself is such a sleek form, and it acts almost as a tail on the truck, so it elongates the truck, and so you end up with a pretty respectable coefficient of drag.
Right.
The last term is the A, the frontal area. This is if you're just looking at the trailer or the truck plus the trailer from the front. If I were to cut that shape out, the outline of the two with a pair of scissors, that is the area that is directly hitting the wind as you're in motion. And so I think the punchline here
and I can't remember what the square feet of that. That's 8 times. Was it 30 square feet or something like that, a frontal area? That
yeah, roughly
the difference
speaking,
between canopy up and down.
Yeah. When the canopy is up, it's a little over 10 feet tall. When it's down, it's a little under 7 feet.
So
usually,
3 times 8, the width. So 24 square feet of flat plate is being. A typical trailer is dragging 24 feet of flat plate against the wind, compared to the Lightship in the same state.
Yeah, it's a 30 or 40% area reduction.
It's a big plate.
Yeah, and so I think exactly the punchline that we're getting to is, okay, take this fundamental equation for aerodynamic drag, which is going to be the most critical design factor, and now for me as an engineer, as a designer, I ask myself, okay, what are the variables that I have to play with here to improve my situation, to make the most efficient vehicle setup possible? Well, I can't really change anything up front here. The velocity or the speed is just whatever the person chooses to drive at. The density of air is just location and temperature dependent. Can't change the first term. So what I have to play with are the CD and the A. And the CD is dependent on the shape of the trailer. It is just how streamlined of a body is it? How much is the air going to attach to that trailer body and then stay attached all the way down the length? Just how smooth is the shape? And the A is the frontal area. It is how tall, effectively, is the trailer. And so what I quickly got to is, well, I can certainly make some improvements on the CD. I can use computer simulation and to a certain extent real world test to refine the coefficient of drag to be the best that it can be, the lowest number possible with any set of tow vehicles and this trailer, which I did through a series of iterative loops with this aerodynamicist, Angus, who I mentioned, and I have the A. And actually the A is the bigger or of the two terms, or it's the area with more potential for impact. And the key architectural choice there was to make a trailer with a telescoping body, one that was capable of collapsing down when you're in transit, so that you have very little frontal area and are slicing through the air as opposed to pushing it. And that was the idea. I didn't have any experience in trailer design at the time, nor was I very deep in this world, but I wanted to know if anyone had done something like this before, and so did a little bit of research, saw that there was an old kind of RV company with a cult following called Hilo, the Hilo trailers.
Still exists.
Yep.
Company's out of business, I think, now, but still exists. So they were the pioneers on the idea. It basically dealt with the flat plate issue, not the CD issue.
Yeah, their shape was not as streamlined, but they did have that key insight of wanting to reduce the frontal area.
I've seen that comment now in a lot of forums. Well, this is just another high-low trailer. Well, half and half. It's part of it, but they didn't deal with the other part. They didn't deal with the coefficient of drag. They just dealt with the flat plate.
Yeah, and to their credit, it would have been, in the time that the high-low trailer was designed, it would have been very hard to do so because you would need to do it physically in a wind tunnel.
Absolutely.
I was able to make a lot more progress with Angus on designing a very efficient, streamlined shape and optimize the coefficient of drag because of these new computer simulation tools that allowed us to, in a very fast, low-cost way, iterate through different shapes and visualize what the airflows looked like over those different shapes to get to an optimal form.
So a nerdy question, given the technology on that hitch, don't you have all the variables that you could actually compute a real-time CD?
Yeah, I mean, yes, sure,
And
we could.
FD, the final output of the equation, you
Yeah.
could, I mean, I think it's already in the math probably at the hitch to drive the motor. There's a real-time FD number constantly changing.
Yep.
That'd be neat to see on Atlas because there are other factors that affect it: wind, temperature, pressure, things a driver can change if he sees his FD moving around and he doesn't understand why. That happens all the time driving down the road. The wind changes and it affects range, real time. So
Yep.
if your FD is changing, you may have to change plans, and that's something that normally running down the road with a trailer, you just don't. You just see the gas gauges going faster than normally, or the power gauge in an EV is going faster or slower than you expected, and it's because you've either changed altitude or the weather's changed, the other variables that come in. So I think that would be fascinating to have an
readout.
aerodynamic page that's displaying some of these things real time, because you've got it. It's all.
Oh yeah.
It's all being computed. How many iterations a second is that thing going?
Probably about 10.
So it's real time.
Yep.
Computate. I think you could
Or I
derive.
should say we're reading about 10 times a
You could
second. We
derive
react
both
a little slower.
coefficient of drag and the full FD output.
Yep.
But that's not what the hitch is really. There's more to what the hitch is seeing. And
Sure. Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, of course.
This is the output at the hitch.
Yeah, so you're right to pick this up. So really, in designing the vehicle, there are two key elements to the drag on that the trailer exerts on the truck. The largest is, or was, the aerodynamic drag, and we've significantly reduced that drag. The other key element is the rolling resistance of the tires. This is basically to say, as you're rolling down the road and your rubber tire is deforming under the weight of the trailer, think with each revolution as it presses down on the road, the rubber of that tire deforms a little bit, and as it bends, as it deforms, there's some heat generated in the tire. The energy required to continually deform the tire at its contact patch with the road takes energy, in short. And so the other element to optimize was the rolling resistance. We wanted to make this travel trailer as lightweight as it could be to bring down the mass term here, and we wanted to select a tire that had the lowest possible coefficient of rolling resistance. This term is somewhat similar to the coefficient of drag in the sense that it's
that term is sensitive to the tire pressure.
Yeah, exactly. It's sensitive to a few things. Actually, I think a number of things in the composition of the tire. I can't claim to be an expert here, but it is the construction, the material choice in the tire pressure, like you said, the temperature of the environment, like the road. And so picking the best possible tire for the setup, and then optimizing the shape of the vehicle when it was in motion is what ultimately led to a very low drag vehicle.
You know, over speeds, this tends to stay about the same, and this part of the force on the hitch goes up with the V squared.
That's right. Yeah, your rolling resistance is relatively constant across a variety of speeds.
it can be computed and they cross over at a certain mile per hour where all of a sudden aerodynamics is a
Dominates.
much bigger part of the
Yep.
force on the hitch than the rolling resistance.
Yep.
The one other variable that's in this particular equation is the impact of the aerodynamics of the tow vehicle on the CD. And that's, again, depending on the tow vehicle, not insignificant. It's part of the whole package about how an owner can further enhance the aerodynamics of this whole system, tow vehicle, Lightship together, and change the hitch forces.
That's true. One thing that is true, and I also, it's been a few years since I've looked directly at this data, the aero data that we're talking about. My recollection is of being personally surprised at how relatively insensitive the total drag of the system was to the shape of the tow vehicle. I think the best example I can give is that you would think there would be a massive difference in the total drag, depending on whether you're using a boxy SUV shape versus a 3-box pickup setup with an open bed. There is a difference. There certainly was a difference.
Yeah, it's small and cumulative. The one study I saw, the aerodynamics, and it happened to be an F-150 like I'm driving, was that the shape of the cover of the bed was one of the bigger variables. And believe it or not, they even simulated an enclosed bottom on the F-150. And that was 5%.
Makes a big difference, yeah. That's right.
So just the treatment of the bed and the underside, obviously you're not going to do that with it. Some of this F-150 has skid plates that do some of that, but right now I'm running a topper that's higher than the cab, and I'm seeing about a 1 mile per gallon difference at highway speeds because it reduces the aerodynamic disruption and the flow over that bed, which normally will come over the cab and go crashing into the bed and then hit the tailgate or even hit a tonneau cover and bounce around and then hit the tow vehicle.
One thing that Angus, our aerodynamicist, and I did is we were looking at the early forms of the Lightship and studying different geometries was to optimize the shape of the nose of the vehicle, which means all of the radii at the transition point between the nose and the center section, and more critically, the angle of attack of the nose. We optimized that angle to be a best fit between a pickup truck and an SUV, not to optimize too heavily towards one or the other, because we knew that people would tow with both.
Right. And further to that, I'm not familiar with other brands, but the F-150 hybrid, actually, if you look at the front, it has shutters over a lot of the air inlets that are modulated based on temperature, the reduced drag.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
based on speed, the reduced drag.
Yep. When it's unnecessary.
Very complicated. So I couldn't believe it's on there,
Yeah.
but it's got little electric motors that are
It's amazing, isn't it?
changing the inlet flow to help reduce drag.
And so I love the upshot of all of this talk of aerodynamics and equations has led you, Bob, to print a vinyl sticker of this fundamental equation that you told me you intend to place on the inside window of your Lightship AE1.
I put it on, yeah. But we tried it out yesterday here at the airport with one of the fellow pilots who understands it. He said, "What's this all about? Why are you doing all this?" I pulled out the drag equation. He said, "Oh, I get it."
It's a good conversation starter.
What's the begin? When someone asks why you're doing all this, you just say, "Solve this equation."
Yeah.
and then come back. Unfortunately, some of the non-math majors won't be able to get that far.
Yeah. No, it's great. I knew for all the reasons that we just talked about how important aerodynamics would be, that it was so fundamental to the concept of this vehicle. And so when I first when I got off of napkin sketching and went to look for a real aerodynamicist who could help me find the right shape, I got in touch with Angus, and my brief to him was, Angus. Angus he's a trailerer himself. He has an RV trailer, so he's passionate about this too. I said, Angus, your brief is start from nothing. If you got the chance to start from nothing, what would you, as a career aerodynamicist, do to make the most aerodynamically efficient trailer shape possible? All I told him was it's going to be roughly this wide, and it'll have a telescoping action to it. Now, what would you create for me? And he loved that brief, because it's very rare in automotive for an aerodynamicist to get a clean sheet brief like that. The second story gets at the design, the industrial design of the trailer. We have an awesome design team here at Lightship, led by a guy named Rob Williams, who has worked on designing cars and shoes his whole life. He's a great automotive designer. And when Rob first came in, he looked at the shape, which was just kind of a blob shape at that point, that Angus and I had arrived at as the most aerodynamic shape. And Rob looked at the shape on the screen, and he took a beat, and I was ready for him to barf at it. And he paused, and then he was like, no, actually, I can work with this. This is maybe the only aerodynamics driven shape that I've ever seen that I'm actually happy with. There's good bones here, and all the rest of the industrial design that's really added the soul to the Lightship followed from that.
Yeah. Well, neat. I appreciate your description of this.
Yeah.
I think there are a bunch of potential buyers who can watch this video and begin to understand what this is all about, because it's not at all clear until you crawl into the math a little bit. You don't have to be a math major for it.
Yep.
The terms are pretty simple. The results are pretty dramatic.
Yep. Yeah. You were saying taking this around the canyons and up to highway speed yesterday.
Yeah. Yesterday was the first day I got to tow since I towed the prototype, and I have the ability to look at instantaneous miles per gallon that comes off the system of the Ford. So I can watch it real time, and at 62 miles an hour, sea level like I am here, no wind, running down the highway, pulling the Airstream, that Ford, with the enhanced aerodynamics of the back cover, will do about 12 miles a gallon at 62. And yesterday, same conditions, 17
miles per gallon from the Lightship.
That's no Trek drive.
Yeah.
That's just aerodynamics only.
So a 5 mile per gallon improvement on what is normally 12 miles per gallon, meaning between a 40 and 50% improvement on your total fuel economy, just thanks to the low rolling resistance and great aerodynamics of a Lightship.
Yeah, and all of that accrues to, and again, this is a special use case for this particular tow vehicle, which happens to be a hybrid with a 31.5 gallon tank. That means I have 500 miles of range without touching this battery. I can go 500 miles and arrive at the campsite with nearly 100% capacity in the battery. That's pretty darn dramatic. And that's not running Trek drive.
This is as opposed to what, 350, 375 with a traditional trailer?
I plan on 300, 310 with the Airstream and all. I've been towing it now since 2021 with a hybrid.
Yep.
And the other way to look at that equation is that if my destination is 500 miles away and I choose not to use Trek drive, and since gas stations are so plentiful compared to fast chargers right now, I can literally go 500 miles, top off, arrive at the campsite, and I have 77 kW battery and a potential of 230 kW convertible gasoline to electric.
Right.
That's awesome. This combination takes this whole package and gets you there with minimal gasoline and the potential to use more power if you want it.
Yep. Yep.
That's neat. Without plugging in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
All thanks to that.
Aerodynamics. I mean,
The efficiency forward mindset and a single fuel source power system.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
So-
we think it's going to change the game, and I think
It does. It's
you can
changed
only.
it.
It's great. Well, I'm so excited for you to get out on the road with it and really kind of keep putting this. What's less and less a theory, but keep putting this practice to the test.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to have some really cool experiences to share with us, which is what I've always dreamed of.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.